So I think there's something really important going on in education, and I wanted to try to pay attention to it and ask some questions about where those things are coming from and how it might impact the future of education. As a bit of background, I'm an international school teacher. I teach secondary school. I've been teaching for over 10 years, and for most of that time, I've been teaching in the IB diploma program. And I want to talk a little bit about the consequences of the IB canceling its examinations this spring, and also the sort of challenges and opportunities that I see in this move from a traditional classroom environment to a virtual classroom. And one of the things I really want to think about is whether or not the traditional classroom or most of the classroom practice has really prepared our students for this type of unprecedented situation. We've talked for many years, I think, in education about this idea of 21st century skills, about preparing students for entrepreneurial kinds of thinking, but we're now faced with this in a very real way, where students have to now adapt to a circumstance that they did not predict. They have to overcome some challenges and find some resilience in themselves. And my question is, to what extent our classroom practice over the last 10 or 15 years has really reflected these needs that we knew were coming? I want to talk a little bit about my experiences over the first few weeks and some of the experiences of colleagues that I've shared. So, just as some overall context, I'm working at an international school in Norway where all of our lessons are being delivered virtually, synchronously through Google Classroom, where we have some set work. We meet with the students sort of face-to-face using these kind of Google Meets. And for the most part, it's been working well. We found that there's a different way that we're using our time in the classroom, so that we can come together at the beginning, come together for maybe sort of relationship building or understanding where the questions are coming from, or if there's some feedback on the work or the scope of the work. And then students typically have a little bit more free time to do some of their own discovery type learning, where they're adapting to the material. And what we found is that most of the students who already have some kind of high motivation for learning are actually really excelling under these conditions. And the question is, why is that? What's not happening in a traditional classroom that now is facilitated in this style of environment? And I think that this is going to be a really important question as we, look past what happens here with the coronavirus, and we think about what the new normal is going to be for traditional classroom learning. How can we blend these lessons that we're learning into the kind of conservative or traditional teaching that's been going on? And that's not to say that all teaching is so conservative, but it really strikes me about how quickly myself and my colleagues and peers around the world have been able to adapt to this new circumstance when there's a real need for it. So what do we do with that information? What do we do with that once things are becoming more normal? I think we have to really consider the fact that the needs in education have been shifting for quite a long time. And that doesn't mean that we throw away the sort of traditional book, paper and pencil kind of teaching and learning. I think those are really critical things for students, but I think it's important that we reflect on which of those really are useful for students who have to face these kinds of, I've said it before, but unprecedented situations where they have to, in a very complex world, make sense for themselves and to try to draw together information and knowledge from lots of different sources. And I think there's going to be some important decisions being made about how education, how examinations, how assessment all looks on the other side of this coronavirus crisis. On the other side of that, I think there's a lot of students who are slipping through the cracks, that without the sort of brick and mortar traditional classroom environment, it's easy for some students to fall behind. And I think that's going to be another thing that we have to consider as we consider best practices going forward. How do we take some of those really important kinds of structural things and which happen in a classroom environment where students are sitting in front of us, and take those into a virtual environment? Or on the flip side, how can we take some of these opportunities to use asynchronous type of learning, or to have students do their own kind of more authentic learning tasks? And by the way, I certainly know that those things are already happening in a lot of great classrooms, and I think most colleagues try to find ways of fitting that in. I know I try to find ways to fit it in, but it doesn't ever seem to hold weight. It doesn't ever seem to be the core of what we're teaching. So I certainly don't have all the answers, but I think for as challenging, as difficult as this crisis has been, I think there's going to be some really important things that are shaking up in the field of education. And we could, I hope, learn really critical lessons about what we expected to be fundamental truths about education, what we expected to be the absolute necessities. We're now finding things like, for example, end of high school examinations. We say, oh, we need those for university applications, but we find that actually there's other ways around that. It may well be that end of high school examinations, exit examinations are best practice. But I think that some of the reasons why we've made those decisions in the past are going to have to be re-examined. And I'm really looking forward to, despite all the challenges ahead, because there are definitely going to be many, I'm really looking forward to the kinds of new pathways in education. And I think that there's going to be a lot of good conversations that come out of this, excellent collaboration between teachers working in different environments. Like I said, I certainly don't have the answers, but I have a lot of questions, and I wanted to put this video out there as a way to maybe connect with some other teachers who are feeling the same way or are thinking about the same kinds of questions. So I hope to continue these video posts as my virtual learning experience, or this learning in the time of coronavirus experience, is continuing. But for now, I want to say thanks for listening, and please do write some comments, give me some feedback, and let me know what you're thinking about in education and what do you see happening around the horizon. Thanks.